Good evening, dear students. We have been talking about pancreas for the past 3 days, acute and chronic pancreatitis and its management. If you revise the thing in your house, you'll become pakka, and that you may get a long question or a short notes and so on. So we thought we'll go for luminal anatomy and surgery. I'm today going to talk about colon carcinoma, part 1. What are the things in part 1? I'll tell you. We are going to talk strictly to the colon, not the colon rectum. The colon starts from the ileocecal junction of the cecum at the beginning part, becomes the hepatic flexure, then the transverse colon, then the sphenical flexure, then the descending colon, then the sigmoid and rectosigmoid. Rectosigmoid is usually at the top of the hollow of sacrum. It is about 15 centimeters from the anal verge. We are not going to talk about that. We are going to stop short with sigmoid and rectosigmoid junction alone. We'll go slowly. It is going to be dealt in 2 parts. Today we'll talk about the embryology, surgical anatomy, etiopathogenesis, some of the polyposis syndrome, which are all pre-malignant condition, and we'll talk about colorectal polyps. Second, tomorrow, we'll be talking about the pathology, the clinical features, staging and management, which includes the investigation, treatment, and follow-up. Why I'm telling you this is, you can read a little bit about it and come tomorrow. Embryology. Now, that is the stomach, that is the foregut. As it comes down near the umbilicus, it becomes the midgut. Beyond that, it becomes the hindgut. The hindgut, if you can see this is the cecum. This is going to be the future colon. That is going to be the small intestine with jejunum and so on. That is the stomach. In the embryology, from the aorta, you get a superior mesenteric artery that becomes a vitellointestinal artery with a fibrosis called vitellointestinal duct. Sometimes there may be a residue here causing the meatus diverticulum, so on and so forth, that we are not going to concentrate much on tomorrow, today. And the rest of the colon is usually, part of the colon is supplied by the superior mesenteric, and the rest of the colon is supplied by the inferior mesenteric. And the lowermost thing from the distal rectum to the anal canal is supplied by the superior hemorrhoidal artery, which is a branch of internal iliac artery. That is the watershed between the portal and the venous system. Correct? Yeah. Okay, we'll go next. The normal rotation of the gut. In the 4th week of the intrauterine life, a loop is formed in the midgut. That's the midgut. That is the superior mesenteric artery. It is supplying, and it becomes the hindgut. Then the midgut starts growing in length, but the coelom is not enough to hold it. So there is an extracoelomic herniation, which is a physiological herniation of the midgut, occurs in the 5th week. After that, the abdominal cavity becomes bigger to accommodate the herniated contents. So there is an orderly return of the small bowel and the colon in 180-degree anti-clockwise. This is anti-clockwise, so that the cecum will come and fix here. The hepatic flexure go there. The splenic flexure will come down, and that is so. So this is the normal anatomy. This is the duodenum first part, second part, third part, fourth part, and then become the duodenojejunal junction, and this you can see. So you can nicely see how the transverse or the whole colonic vessels is covering the third part of the duodenum. Until you open here, you cannot enter into the third part of the duodenum for any surgery. The final stage is the descent of the cecum, fixation of the descending colon, posterior parietal peritoneum, the whole thing. So now the colon becomes fixed in 2 parts. Usually the cecum is mobile, in some other cases it's fixed, and the ascending and descending colon are fixed. These are fixed but intraperitoneal completely. But these are covered anteriorly by the peritoneum, and literally it becomes the retroperitoneal structure. That is what, in nutshell, about the normal rotation of the gut. Anything in this can go in for a midgut rotation arrest, can go in for a common duodenocele isthmus with valvulus neonatorum, so on and so forth, situs inversa. That we are not going for today. Surgical anatomy. So this is the ileocecal junction, that is the appendix. The cecum is the most capacious organ. It has got a diameter of 7.5 centimeter, and it can dilate to any extent. That is why this is more prone for rupture according to the Laplace's law. The more the diameter of the rounded organ, the more the pressure it exerts on the wall so that it easily gets perforated. Then again, the ascending colon, it's about 10 centimeter. That from the hepatic flexure. Then the 50 centimeter length is the transverse colon. Then it comes the descending colon is the splenic flexure. Descending colon is about 10 centimeter. And then comes the sigmoid, which usually curves like that, and then comes into the rectosigmoid junction, which means 15 centimeter. So this is roughly a diagrammatic representation of the colon inside. The length is about 150 centimeter. Ascending and descending retroperitoneal place, as I said. Greater caliber is 7.5 centimeter. The lowest is 2.5 at the rectosigmoid. Rest of the area is anywhere between 3 and 5. How do you differentiate a large bowel from the small bowel? The small bowel has condensation of the longitudinal fibers along the three aspects of the colon, which becomes tinea coli. And if you see in the X-ray, you can see the nice hostrations. The hostrations are differently placed compared to a valvulae conjunctis, where they are very circular, something like a coil of spring. But it's not so here. It is differently placed. So discontinuity between the hostrations will be there. That is typical of that. An appendices epiploic is nothing but the outward projection of the fat covering the colon, which may sometimes containing an anastomotic vessel. There may not be any continuity here. It may go like that and come. If you divide that, you are likely to go in for ischemia at that area. That's all. And this is the marginal artery of Drummond. So this is how the blood supply is being. These are the tinea. There are three tinea, 1, 2, and one more must be somewhere there. It's not being shown here. There are three tinea. 2 or 3? 3. Fuses at the base of the appendix. Cecum mobile, completely covered by the peritoneum. Sometimes we cannot agree on that. We get the cecum that is fixed, and we get a little retroperitoneal cecum, but majority of the cases it's mobile. That's why we could pull it out and do a appendicectomy in an open appendix. Cecum ascending are related posterior to the psoas major, the nerves, lateral femoral cutaneous nerve, femoral and genitofemoral nerve, the gonadal arteries and veins, and ureter. It's on the right side. The gonadal artery can be an ovarian vessel in case of a female, but it can be a spermatic vessel in case of the male. It goes, the vein is joining at the, on the right side. The vein joins into the IVC directly, whereas on the left side it joins the left renal vein. You must know that because IVC is more placed towards the right side. So you must know two folds here. One is fold of Treves. The other one is an inferior ileocecal fossa that is folded by Gorlach's valve. How this is important? Usually this contains the vascularity to the appendix. While you're going, you must be catching all the vessels so that it's free from the at the tip. How this is important is to identify the terminal ileum. The terminal ileum is identified by this ileocecal fold of Treves. The other one is It is joining the cecum by identifying the ileocecal junction. You can see whenever you do an appendix, pull the cecum, pull the terminal ileum, and you will see the appendix nicely. Whatever it is, the base has to come here only. That is another way of identifying the appendix. Ileocecal valve, it is posterior medially placed. It prevents reflux. Most of the times it is competent. Sometimes it will be incompetent. That will lead to terminal ileitis due to reflux in case of inflammatory bowel disease. If it is closed, it gives a problem. If there is an obstruction en route here, then the whole thing become a closed loop obstruction. The patient is likely to go on for perforation of the cecum, and that is the appendix. Appendix and cecum, terminally, both are guarded by valves. What is the valve for the appendix? You are telling it subsequently. Gerlach. Okay. Ascending colon, there is no mesentery at all. Usually the vessels comes here and then go into get the blood supply to the superior mesenteric artery in the form of ileocolic, right colic, and middle colic. Right colic may be an ascending and descending branch. Ileocolic supplies most of the ileum and little bit of the colon. And here comes up to the middle colic, it is the superior mesenteric watershed. This is on the right side, it is called Jackson's membrane. By incising the membrane, the whole colon can be shifted to this side so that nicely you can do any colonic surgery. And here becomes the vessel. Always the vessel supply from the medial to lateral. So you can reflect from lateral to medial the complete colon. So it will not hamper anything. Now we are coming to the hepatic flexure. Yesterday I was talking to you about the cattle brush procedure. In cattle brush procedure, you have to incise a little bit of this thing here, then, and you'll have to divide these ligaments, cystocolic and hepatocolic ligaments. And then if you go, there will be a lesser sac with the gastrocolic omentum. Divide that, bring this whole colon down so that the whole pancreas under vision. That's called cattle brush procedure. Transverse colon is about roughly 50 centimeter length, but it can be like a garland. It is called dolicho colon. So it depends on the individual cubitus and the habit of the individual, how much of roughage he is taking. It's completely covered with peritoneum. One great advantage of transverse colon is this can be taken up anywhere to serve as a conduit, especially in case of stricture of the esophagus following a corrosive injury, or in sometimes when we want to completely resect the esophagus and the stomach, this can be taken as a conduit in the posterior mediastinum itself. There is supracolic, that is nothing but supracolic compartment is nothing but the lesser sac. The content of the lesser sac is pancreas, head of the pancreas, tail of the pancreas. Infracolic is completely the mesentery of the small bowel is infracolic compartment. Usually the infracolic and the supracolic compartment are not connected except at the foramen of Winslow. That is called the free border of the lesser omentum, otherwise known as gastrohepatic ligament, which contains all the three important structures, goes to the liver. And underneath, you can go into the lesser sac. See, you can see how beautiful it is. This is how it is. This is the duodenum. This is the visceral peritoneum. These are the reflections. That is the whole coelomic cavity. That is where you will get the foramen of Winslow, from where the lesser sac, which is here, gets connected here and comes here. That is what it is. The root of the transverse mesocolon is very important as far as the surgical gastroenterology is concerned, because whenever we want to do a mesocaval shunt or a mesocaval shunt especially, we will have to dig out of this area and go to the third part of the duodenum. Here is the third part, now it's divided. You will get the superior mesenteric vessel and the superior mesenteric vein. Then if you shift the whole colon or open up the colonic mesocolon here, you'll get the IVC somewhere there, and you can do a mesocaval anastomosis. This is after removing the complete colon, you see like this. This is the peritoneal attachment to the colon. Here it is only anterior, here anterior and posterior is the mesentery. Here only anterior, again anterior and posterior is the mesentery. This is called sigmoid mesocolic attachment. This is called transverse mesocolic attachment. I think I am clear. And that is the rectus sigmoid in the hollow of the sacrum. That comes the pelvis lower down. The splenic flexure, very, very important, especially in an obese individual, because most of the time the splenic flexure get adhered to the spleen. And if you pull it, you may likely to tear this area and cause a hemorrhage. Sometimes it will compel you to do a splenectomy unnecessarily. You will have to nicely divide it. Sorry. And this is called line of Todd. Line of Todd is on the left side, inside the peritoneum. Push the colon whole thing to the right side and also divide this ligamentous attachment. Then you will go into the lesser sac, divide the gastrocolic omentum. The whole of the colon will be in your hand with the middle colic somewhere here. From the left colic ascending and descending branch, from the inferior mesenteric here. Then comes the sigmoid vessels, then lower down. That is how it is. You must have such a thorough knowledge about your anatomy that even on this thing you must be able to say what it is. This phrenicocholic ligament is important because it comes from the diaphragm and forms a shell. That is where it goes. It prevents the downward enlargement of the spleen. It goes to the right side and crosses the midline. That is the important differentiation clinical feature between a splenic enlargement and a renal enlargement. So that is what it is. Then comes the descending colon, is 10 to 25 centimeter long. Relations there, it is, if you carefully look on the right side, it is immediately related to the psoas. But on the left side, the relationship of the quadratus lumborum, left adrenal gland, left kidney, left ureter, left gonadal vessels, iliohypogastric and ilioinguinal lower down. These two nerves you will come across when you are doing a laparoscopic hernia. These are the two nerves which you should not touch, because otherwise the patient will go in for a continuous numbness on the medial and also the pain because of the inflammation. Over a period of time, they lost sensation. You get lots of sensation in the root of scrotum on the right side, the left side. This is how it is. Then white line of Todd is more important. Then that is an important surgical plane. If you are nicely coming down in the white line of the Todd, shift the sigmoid, shift the rectus sigmoid, you will go into the holy plane behind the rectum, into the hollow of the sacrum. That is an important surgical plane. The vulnerable things are the left ureter, left gonadal vessel. More vulnerable is left gonadal vessel because it is usually attached to the peritoneum. You must slowly push it down, especially in a ninth fellow. Ureter you can always easily find out until and otherwise it gets infiltrated by the tumor, or the anatomy is disturbed, or you are not careful. Otherwise it can be saved. Sigmoid colon, 40 centimeter. It is an S-shaped organ. Two portions. It has got an iliac portion and a pelvic portion. The iliac portion is almost fixed. The pelvic portion forms something like an S, and which is mobile. So you can nicely see, this is the iliac portion. That comes into the pelvic portion, it dipped down. You can see how it is being supplied by all the vessels. This is an inverted V. If at all you want to prevent those days, a valvulus is occurring, we divide the peritoneum here and plicate it so that it will not have a long length rotate. But that is all outdated. Now we straight away going for the resection anastomosis. Depends on the condition, or resection with ostomy and mucus fistula. Whatever it is suitable over that area, we will do it. Those days we were worried about the critical point of SUDEC that has been nullified. It's proved to be contrary. These are inverted superior rectal vessels. That is, superior rectal vessels are nothing but the rectal vessels which are coming at the terminal branches of the sigmoid artery with the landmark of the identification of the ureter on the left side. Arterial supply, beautifully this thing. There is the superior aorta, there is the superior mesenteric artery, there is the inferior mesenteric artery. The superior mesenteric artery gives the iliac colic, then it gives the right colic, which has got an ascending and descending branch. It has got a middle colic. Then from the inferior mesenteric, middle colic again has got a left and a right branch, which gets connected to the inferior pulmonary artery branch via the ascending branch of the left colic artery. There is a descending branch of the left colic artery. These are the sigmoid artery. That comes as the superior hemorrhoidal, superior rectal artery. Superior rectal artery is nothing but the terminal branches of the inferior mesenteric artery. I think it's very clear here. A beautiful diagram. I must thank Kiran who has done this for me. Singham Kiran, his name is. The superior mesenteric artery, how it supplies, you can see. Oh, you have shown the other one. Okay. That's all. The same thing is showing in a different way. There's the iliac colic, right colic, middle colic. Then it comes here. Then it comes the jejunal branch. The first jejunal branches are given, iliac branches. This is nothing but the branches of the superior mesenteric artery. It comes to the middle or the proximal two-third of the transverse colon. Up to that, it's supplied. After that, it gets linked with the superior mesenteric artery and starts supplying. Inferior mesenteric artery and starts supplying. There is the iliac colic artery. You can see the branches: appendicular branch, anterior and posterior cecal vessels, inferior colic branch, superior colic branch. The branch is superior mesenteric artery. Okay, next. Now the right colic has got an ascending and a descending branch. This is the middle colic. Middle colic, you must always be very careful because a slight pull it will come off. And that's how it supplies. This is the right colic branches. It's again a branch of the superior mesenteric artery. The middle colic, very important. It comes out through this. And if you imagine you are going beyond that and saying there will be a gastrocolic trunk will be there, especially the vein, which is being hidden by the transverse mesocolon here. When you open up the lesser curve and bring this down, you can nicely see that. That's a very important thing. Middle colic is usually a branch of the superior mesenteric artery. It joins with the branches of the inferior mesenteric artery by the way of left ascending branch, left colic ascending branch. Then the whole artery of Brahman is completed. That is how it is. Beautiful lower part of the pancreatic neck. Excellent. Excellent. So now this is the left colic artery. How it supplies ascending, descending branch, sigmoid vessels, and finally it will go into the superior hemorrhoidal, superior vessels. These are the things roughly you must know about it, nothing much. There may be sometime an accessory middle colic artery arising from the superior inferior mesenteric artery. Ascending and left colic has got ascending and descending branch. Mandary artery is called the artery of Royalon, which connects the inferior mesenteric and the superior mesenteric. Arcade, intact left colic artery with collaterals, colonic interpositionist procedure that you will come to know. If someone of you have assisted us in our department, you will know better. We place our colonic conduit based on the left colic vessels, both ascending and descending branches, dividing the iliac colic, right colic, and the middle colic, leaving the artery of Brahman, that is the marginal artery, intact. Splenic flexure is vulnerable to ischemic. This is called Griffith point. This is one of the commonest area for the ischemic colitis. The point being said is, imagine this is the colon, and there will be the vessel. There's a long way it has to travel and come into the colon Because of that, there is always a point of ischemia. This Griffith point is the point where there is commonest occurrence of ischemic colitis. Marginal artery of Drummond, you should never touch this fellow, deadly. This is the only fellow which is making the colon survive. You can divide this, divide here, divide here somewhere so that the whole lobe is there. This is the left colic. The whole of the colon will have its arterial supply, provided the artery of Drummond is in continuity. That is what we used to do in our coloplasty or colonic interposition. Critical point of Sudak, nobody has agreed on this, is just about the origin of the sigmoid artery, last sigmoid artery, but it is disproved. No more it is accepted. Arrangement of the arterial supply in the wall, I have already told you. This is a venous drainage. You can beautifully see the whole thing is draining. In the rectum, it is draining into the internal iliac. From here, it goes to the inferior mesenteric vein. It can either open in the splenic vein, or it can open into the inferior mesenteric vein, or it can open at the junction of the inferior mesenteric vein. Sometimes it goes inside and open into the portal vein. All these are possible. This is on the right side. This is superior mesenteric vein, inferior mesenteric vein. Gastrocolic trunk is very important. Yesterday, I told you that you'll have to take care of one of the vessel when you want to go in the pancreas in this area. That vessel is nothing but the gastroepiploic, right gastroepiploic vein and this connecting vein. This has to be divided so that you can nicely cut through the pancreas, pushing it down. That's all. Correct? Lymphatic drainage. You've got epicolic nodes, you've got paracolic nodes, you've got principal nodes, you've got intermediary nodes. Very easy to remember. Epicolic means on the colon. Paracolic means on the Drummond. Principal intermediate is along the branches of the vessels, tributaries. Then principal node is the origin. Nowadays, there's a question about removing the principal node. They say the principal node involvement is a stage 4 disease. It's no longer helpful in clearance. That's what they say. But still we go ahead and do it. That's what it is now. No. Now, so far we have discussed about the anatomy, embryology, anatomy, especially the applied anatomy of the colon in the form of its length, in the form where it all it is fixed, in the form what is the musculature, what is pinea coli, what is appendices epiploicae, what are the castrations, what is its blood supply, what is its venous drainage, what is its lymphatic drainage. That completes the applied anatomy of the colon. Now we'll have to go. Why at all we need to know? We may have to resect the colon in some of the benign conditions, ranging from a limited resection to total colectomy, especially in inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis, and toxic megacolon, and so on. And also in malignancy, where we'll have to do a right hemicolectomy, extended right hemicolectomy, left hemicolectomy, extended left hemicolectomy, sigmoidectomy, anterior resection, low anterior resection, ultra low anterior resection, and so on. But that, if you do not know the anatomy of the colon, it will be a nightmare. If you know the colon, it's hardly anything. You can just like that do. Etiology of colonic cancer is hereditary. It runs in families. It can be familial or it can be sporadic. Sporadic is the most common thing. Risk factors, this bimodal distribution, it's non-modifiable. Inflammatory bowel disease, the most common being the ulcerative colitis. The next one is a Crohn's colitis. The other one is an indeterminate colitis. All these causes constant ulceration, metaplasia, that leads to malignancy. That is how it is. The whole thing depends on what is the distribution, how much is the distribution in the colon, how long it has been there. That is why in an IBD you must take multiple biopsies and prove that there are no isolated loci of a malignancy and a family history. These are all non-modifiable, modifiable dietary fat. You can reduce it. The more of the fat, it is worse it is. Fiber deficiency. We don't have fiber deficiency, but because of the incoming junk foods and other things, the fiber content of our body our food has come down. If you are originally taking the fiber content like wheat and rice-based diet, along with a lot of vegetables and fruits, you do not have this problem. This causes two. One, it prevents the diverticular disease, which is common in the Caucasians, and also it prevents malignancy because the quick emptying and not staying of the fecal matter inside the colon, the bulk forms make it delivered quickly. So, to a very great extent, the fiber content of the diet, if it's more, it prevents diverticulosis. To a very great extent, it reduces the risk of malignancy. The other one is alcohol. Alcohol and smoking are very good friends of malignancy anywhere in the body. Sedentary lifestyle due to hyperfat, again, that leads to production of oncogenes. What is that? I don't know. Oncologically active substances that leads to malignancy, again, obesity, radiation. If the patient has been irradiated for a pelvic pathology, especially in cases of CA cervix and so on, that increases the risk of rectosigmoid and sigmoid malignancies. The AC is not good here. Polyposis syndrome, there are two types. One is familial adenomatous polyposis syndrome. The other one is a familial hamartomatous polyposis syndrome. When I was a student, this hamartomatous polyposis, whether it's malignant or not, was very questionable. Now there are reasonable evidences to say these are also pre-malignant conditions. But compared to polyposis, the hamartomas has got a less tendency towards malignancy. That's what you must take it. FAP, vibrance is Gardner, Turcot, and attenuated familial adenomatous polyposis. One by one, we will discuss. Gardner, familial hamartomatous, then is Puert-Jigger, juvenile polyposis syndrome, Cowden syndrome, and Bain-Reilly, Raoul-Kavas syndrome. It's all only for your theory. One you must know about Cowden, juvenile, and Puert-Jigger. Gardner is 100% risk for malignancy. You must know that. It's an adenomatous polyp, autosomal dominant, APC gene, 100 to thousands of colorectal polyps. Apart from that, you can get duodenal adenomas, desmoid tumor, and epidermoid cyst. Congenital hypertrophy of the retinal pigmental epithelium is noted in some other cases. The risk for chronic malignancy is 100%. So this is called Gardner syndrome. When I was a student, this used to be a short notes. So you can see how the multiple polyposis where they've done a total colectomy. See, it is associated with osteomas of the mandible. So you can see nice osteomas, how beautifully it is delineated in the X-ray. This is also an accompaniment of Gardner syndrome. Screening, you must do a proctosigmoidoscopy, flexible, up to 10 to 12 years of age. Repeat it 1 to 2 years until 35 years of age. After that, it's not there. Repeat it for 3 years after 35 years of age. You must see for any fresh polyp. If a polyp is arising, take it and send it for biopsy. If there are multiple polyps, if there are some sessile polyps, it's hard to touch with your scope to take that biopsy and send it to rule out the malignancy. We also do, other than proctosigmoidoscopy, we can get a complete colon. Nowadays, we switched over to a complete colonoscopy. Turcot syndrome, you get a medulloblastoma in the brain or a glioblastoma. autosomal dominant, APC MLH1, PMS2, few colorectal polyps. I'm yet to see a Turcot. Increased risk of brain tumors. I'm yet to see a Turcot, it's only for completion's sake. Cowden dominant, PTEN, mucocutaneous lesion, goitus fibroadenomas. Increased risk of CA colon, 10% risk for thyroid cancer, 50% risk for breast adenocarcinoma. It's called Cowden. We can show you how the mucocutaneous lesions are, how the polyps are. This is the colon. Familial juvenile polyposis, dominant SMAD4-DRC4, juvenile polyps more than that throughout the GI tract, increased risk of colorectal cancer, gastric and duodenal cancer. I had a patient with a duodenal malignancy. On and off, he used to lose a lot of blood and become anemic. We could not make out where was the lesion at all. Already we have removed the colon for that fellow. And finally, one fine day, we could make it out that there is a tumor rising from the second part of the duodenum. So we have to go and do a vocal sphincter duodenectomy. That fellow has become a close friend of our whole hospital. He is employed in one of the nursing homes in Chennai now. This Stuart Jagger, mucous lesions, autosomal dominant, small number of polyps in GI6, maximum you can see in small intestine, pigmented lesions on the skin, increased risk of malignancy, GI malignancy as a whole. But compared to familial adenomatous polyposis and all, the involvement of the proneness to the malignancy is much less in Stuart Jagger. Hereditary non-polyposis colon cancer is called Lynch syndrome, autosomal dominant. These are the genetic defect, MLH1, MSH2, MSH6, PMS1, PMS2. I cannot even remember. We'll send you the PPT, you write it in your exam after memorizing it. Smaller number of colorectal polyps. There is a risk, lifetime risk of 70 to 80% colorectal risk. We continued colonoscopy at 20 to 25 years of age. Repeat every 1 to 3 years. That's the follow-up screening recommendations. Colorectal polyps. There are tubular adenomas, there are villous adenomas, and tubulovillous adenomas. They can be pedunculated or sessile. This I've already told you. Tubulous adenoma is usually an innocent fellow. Villous is definitely has got a very high malignant potential. This tubulovillous, you'll have to surveil it now and then and take a biopsy and see what's happening. What are the things you will see? If it's a pedunculated, whether it is nicely moving with your gas insufflation or it becomes a stiff one. If it's becoming a stiff one, that means there is a malignant infiltration. One of the things I'm telling you. See, this is a pedunculated, nice peduncle. This is adenoma. This is sessile. This is dangerous, early to infiltrate. This is, you can just simply do a polypectomy and verify the base. There is any evidence of any malignancy. If nothing is there, you can just follow the patient. Whereas this, if it is very much localized, there is no malignancy noted anywhere by a biopsy, you can do a local surgery and send the whole specimen for biopsy, endomucosal resection or endomucosal dissection, if it is an approachable area, and send it for biopsy. Tubular adenoma as such are innocent. Villous, deadly fellow, it throws out. Majority of the patients, how would they come to you? I'll tell you. They say, without my knowledge, I'm passing large quantity of mucus. I do not know how it comes, I'm passing because these fellows have got a tendency to throw out a lot of mucus. It distends the rectum, especially if there's a rectal villous adenoma. They will constantly be soiling their inner garment. And sometimes they will have no feeling of passing out so much mucus. The diagnostic feature of villous adenoma of the rectum. So, risk of adenoma carcinoma, tubular polyp less than 1, tubular polyp more than 2 is 35, less than 1 is 5, villous polyp more than 2 centimeter, 50% malignancy. So, how will you assess whether this is turning malignant? That nice ciliated movement will stop in one of the projections. One of the villi will become stiff. Oh, that fellow is something wrong. Take a biopsy of that. Or if it is a resectable fellow, then the whole thing and send it for biopsy. If it comes as malignant, we treat it as malignancy of the colon. Haggett's classification proposed for polyps containing cancer based on the depth of invasion of the carcinoma. Level 0, do not invade the muscularis mucosa. Remember, I'm not talking about the muscularis propria, muscularis mucosa. Level 1, muscularis mucosa into the submucosa, but limited to the head of the polyp. The stalk is good. Level 2, invade the neck of the polyp, still the stalk is good. Level 3, invades any part of the stalk. Level 4, invades into the submucosa or the bowel wall below the stalk of the polyp, but above the muscularis propria. All these can be done a local excision by a SNAP and send it for biopsy. If it proves the basis, the stalk is good, there is no need. This is the Haggett's classification. You can see level 0, level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. But muscularis propria is not involved. This is with a stalk, this is without a stalk. Both are capable of being done with a local excision. Hyperplastic polyps, they are non-neoplastic, mostly colonic, predominantly right colon, mostly in older women and smokers. Just take a biopsy if there is an hyperplastic polyp, leave the patient alone. Adenoma carcinoma sequence, this has been going over years together. Normal tissue, APC gene, dysplastic aberrant foci, early adenoma, KRAS, intermediate adenoma, DCC, late adenoma, P53 suppression, carcinoma, other changes, metastasis. This is called, you must know this sequence, adenoma carcinoma sequence. This is called Fearon-Vogelstein adenoma carcinoma sequence in sporadic and hereditary colorectal cancer. Please note down this, we will send you the PPT. I think today I've completed about the basic embryology, the anatomy, complete applied anatomy of the colon from the ileocecal junction to the rectosigmoid junction. And I've also discussed etiological factors, including the inflammatory bowel disease. And I've also spoken about the various polyps that are occurring with the tendency towards malignancy to what percentage, and what we have to do about all this. Even I have talked about the sporadic hereditary colorectal cancer. We'll talk about, we have talked about the risk factors involved like alcoholic intake, smoke, inflammatory bowel disease, everything we have this less of fire, increased fat, sedentary life, obesity, and all that increase less amount of fibers in your diet, taking junk diet, taking highly refined food. So all these you have discussed. These are the very basics of the carcinoma of the colon. Tomorrow we'll go ahead with the complete treatment modality, including the neoadjuvant therapy, adjuvant therapy. What is the role of radiation therapy? Is there any role at all? What you will do? How will you stage the disease? Everything we'll do tomorrow. Today's attendance, I'll tell your friends. Today there are only 30 participants. 2 participants have recently joined. Tell them to make use of this. I'll not bore you much. Tomorrow, one class, after that, one day you got a gap in between. Then I will come to you on Monday. So we shall see tomorrow. Some of you can tell me how it was. Open up.